I think that what my frustration is sometimes in general, right, is people negotiate from a position of no power. Mm-hmm. And they just negotiate and they just say, you know what? I want that green box and that's what I want. And I don't, and that's what I'm saying. I'm like, but like, you don't actually, like, none of you own that green box. Like, it doesn't, but people negotiate from, I think if people start to negotiate from a sense of knowledge, and you can't get to the knowledge, so everybody wants to go in fighting based on assumptions, right? And we know what happens with assumptions, but it's even deeper. It's you want to fight about something based on your belief of what the other person thinks. And I'm like, why don't we just start with, what do you think? What do you know? Like, why don't we just start to clear the air and say, okay, if we, we had a situation because we help big companies negotiate. And we had a situation where I was like, I think that this is what they're saying, but if it's not, we got a big problem, right? So let's just first check and see if that's what they're saying. And we said it and we clarified, and it was better than what we thought. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, stop talking. We're good with it. Yeah, stop. But I think that that's part of it, is that if, especially in any situation where there's conflict, if you can both start to, like, let's all be on even playing ground with the facts, with the knowledge. Like, instead of me thinking, Kim looks kind of mad, she's always pissed at me, things like that. And Elliot's so nice. Let's just ask them. Right. It could be reversed.
I don't know if am I pointing toward you?
This way. Yeah.
Melissa, the language I use for that, everyone comes in with their story, right? And the other person's wrong and they're right. Like, people ask me in mediation, do people come in thinking they're so right? Yeah, both sides come in thinking they're right and the other's wrong. That's just a given. So I use the language, they say their story, and I know that, it includes, I know that they're, they write their story for the other person. So I say, so the story you're telling yourself about Elliot is, blah, blah, blah. So I make it clear that, we don't know if that's true. We'll ask Elliot if that's true, but what you're telling yourself. So I use the story you're telling yourself a lot, which is a Brene Brown thing. Kudos to her for introducing that we make up a story in our mind about the other person's motives, and then it becomes our truth. And that the truth is, we need to confirm that to find out what their truth is. Yeah.
And bias comes in there too. And it's not just the bias of the parties and the attorneys, but it's also the bias of the mediator. And you need to check in with that as far as how you're perceiving the people you're working with. And making sure that you are hearing stories and not doing that confirmation bias where you think you know what the answer is, because that's when you start to trip into some dangerous area, when you think you know what the answer is, and that might not be the answer. It's their answer.
And it's a subtlety, because I had a situation recently where I'll change some of the circumstances so that they don't know. But that I had a mediator that came in. So let's say one spouse, right? So it was kind of a gender thing. And so the male mediator came into the female, and very professional, right? Goes in to the husband. Hey, hey, where are you? Making jokes like, how's the weather? How's the cards? How's it? And I was like, and I'm being a little bit obnoxious about it. It was not, it was not to that extent. It was way more subtle. It was, they came in and was just like professional, and they came into the other party and made a joke. And I was like, and to me, it was like bright as day. And I was like, whoa, how did you but I don't think they saw it because it was like a subtlety. And really, if no one brought it up, like I'm always paying attention though. I'm paying attention to everybody.
Mhm.
Right. And so I thought that was an interesting and we had a conversation about it. And, because it's sort of like if somebody has stuff in your teeth, don't you want somebody to tell you? Like, I felt like we had a relationship that I could say something, but they got it. But those are the types of implied or implicit bias, that I would normally maybe see a woman and be like, oh, cute purse, love it. Even something like that, it's already changing the dynamic, like I have to come in and treat everyone just regardless of race, gender, anything, right? I can't be too familiar. I can't be too because that's what we do in relationships. Like, what do you guys think about that? Because maybe you use that sometimes, but I think that we have to be careful with how we kind of approach that. And, because I've seen it in the courthouse, we've seen it all along that we're all like in the courthouse, the hallway, and we're like, hey, what's going on? Hey, how? Yeah. And then we get to the courtroom, we're like, Your Honor, how are you? Or the other attorney, like we ignore them, or the other expert, but I think that you have to be careful because if the clients see that, they're going to take it very differently. So
Rapport
mhm.
and trust measured with that professionalism is such a hard thing to balance. And the example that you gave, of course, was someone who was a little bit out of balance
Mhm.
and needed to rein it back a little bit and maybe loosen it up in the other room. You need
Mhm.
to know who your audience is. And in your pre-mediation, like when I talk to the attorneys ahead of time, I try to find out a little bit more about their clients, their dispositions, what their interests are, what their favorite sports team is, or do they like to go fishing? Try to find something that you can add to the conversation without distracting from the purpose of the mediation. Because if they don't trust you, it becomes much more difficult to guide them down the road, the journey of mediation.
You gave me that advice before. You said, like you do some research on the attorneys and whatever. So I did it recently for another expert.
Mm-hmm.
Worked perfect. Like I looked at like what were his passions, what was he interested in, and there was at some point, and that's where I think all these skills you can use in any space, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
there was at one point where things were starting to get tense. And I knew that if we talked about music or we talked about whatever, which is his passion, right? And you have to figure out how to interject it and things
Right.
like that. It's not always easy. But I knew that we could kind of bring it back, like we could kind of get it out of that space. Because I think that another issue that I think, because at this point I'm just like throwing out because I want some good advice. Another issue I think is that a lot of people say you have to stop being emotional in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I exactly, Kim. I don't think so. I think that we need to be better at how
That's right.
we deal with it, not making them do a certain way.
100% right. So to go back to the professionalism and how we show up, I was trained in mediation. So you mentioned it before. My goal is to empower two people to make their best decision,
Mm-hmm.
right? And hopefully to see each other as humans, to be able to preserve some type of relationship, whatever that is, but they own the process. And in doing that, I can't come in having more power over them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even how I dress is an issue. Am I coming in so that I look like a judge or an attorney in a litigation part, not a mediator? I need to be elevating them and not myself. So that means that I don't doubt that I'm probably warmer than maybe an attorney might be in this. So I'm I am more personal. I tell stories about me, how I can relate to I get it. This happened to me. So the things that make connection, that empower them to be understood. It's interesting, they comment about the purse or something. I get that shows, our own bias in that. But I think I'm going to be thinking about that. But I think my role is to make them as comfortable, heard, and empowered so that they can have discussions, which means keeping myself at a non-elevated, non-expert level as far as they're concerned. They're the experts on them. I'm just helping them guide, what.
And that's what I think I took away from what Elliot just said was, you know what, I could go in and say, oh, cute purse or something like that. I just need to do the same thing. So when I go
That's
into the
right.
husband, it's like, oh, nice tie or da da da. And so I
Exactly.
could build the rapport. I just need to do it on a consistent level. I think
That's right.
that was a good one, Elliot. I like that.
Well said. Very well said. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So a couple other things that I think are interesting is, this concept of using the virtual world and networking. So, and I think that this is not just for networking, but, the virtual world has kind of changed mediation as well. And so in that capacity, what do you think, at this point, we're a year into a pandemic. I gotta be honest with you. I think in another year, we're going to be okay. So what do you think we're going to keep from this pandemic economy, which is what I call it right now? And what do you think we're not going to keep? Like, what do you think has really been helpful in mediation, either from growing your business or even just from doing mediation this way?
Go ahead, Kim.
Well, someone asked me early in the pandemic, what's been the good side of this? And at that point, I didn't recognize. But like you said earlier, we're able to connect with people in places we never have before.
Right.
And that's mind-boggling. I would have never met Elliot or you or just about anybody. My world was so much smaller. I think we found that there's some benefits. While I miss personal mediation, there are losses, to be had for not mediating one-on-one. There are subtleties, there's connection. There are some things that we're sacrificing. But on the flip side of that, it's made mediation in some ways easier. I think people do tend to feel more empowered in their own homes or wherever they're having their mediation from. Mostly, we've been able to outreach to, more people to just say what we do and be available to more people because of this. I mean, just what we've saved on travel time alone, right? So I have the question that's being pulled, of course, is what will happen when we get everything back? And I think across the board, people think that we're going to be keeping this as a form of mediation. I heard one case of someone who representing a big company that would have flown for mediation say, I'll never have to fly again. I can do this virtually. So it's opened up a lot of potential. I don't think we should sacrifice the times that we can connect for making it all virtual. I think it'll be a hybrid. And I think that's across the board, not just in our profession, but just about in everything. We've found a new way to do things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously LinkedIn is a good place for professional networking. People are also using Facebook for that. There's some who use TikTok. I don't, but there are some who do. I think websites are very important, and this virtual mediation that we're doing now, I think that's going to be a piece of our business, whether it's all virtual or hybrid, where you're with some people and you're with the other people through the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some challenges there. And again, Susan Guthrie does a nice job of talking about those challenges.
Yeah, and I think that everybody should go watch her recent video because
Mhm.
it actually brought to light some of the issues about the hybrid. But
Mhm.
the only analogy that I can use is like my kids have dance class on Saturdays. So it snowed, right?
Mm.
And I was like, oh, we're going to miss dance class. No, we aren't. It's by Zoom. Like there's certain
Mhm.
things, and it's the same if you have domestic abuse issues in mediation. That was we had protocols of how people would come into the building, how people would leave the building, when, how, everything, right? It doesn't need to be necessary. Like if that person feels such horror being in the space of somebody else, why are we doing it? Why
Mm.
shouldn't, or if you have a mediation, because we're always trying, for collaborative, you're scheduling 6 people
Mhm.
or more. And it's very hard to get 6 people consistently to meet together. Well, what if one person gets a sick kid or something happens? It's going to be nice to be able to still keep that meeting, have the one person come in with Zoom or Skype or something.
Mhm.
But the logistics of that, like we thought the logistics were interesting doing all online or all in person. Now, if you have a hybrid, and it's not like it's impossible, but I think you need to be getting prepared for it now. Like, how can you continue to operate? Even when we had a snow day recently, I was
Mhm.
like, do we really have snow days anymore? Like, aren't all of us capable of working at any point, at any time now? Those are great things. But then it's how do you establish the boundaries and how do you establish, how we work within those and be prepared because she said in her video, which I thought was true, you need to get prepared for it now. Maybe we're not going to have hybrid for the next year, right? But when it hits, if you already have the technology and you already have the capability, you will win in the eyes of a lot of people because you facilitated something that and solved a problem that nobody else could. So I think it's going to be important.
Absolutely.
The online has helped clients as well, and the courts and in things like the landlord tenant cases that are, or the civil cases for non-payment and things. People had a hard time getting to court, especially
Mhm.
unrepresented people. So it's helped them be able to do it on their time from their home. Transportation can be hard. Childcare can be hard. So even in the legal system, I think I've heard judges say, they're liking this. They're still doing their cases just fine.
It's a whole different ball game to do online trials and online depositions. But when I show up at 10 a.m. for court and I actually go on the stand, that's unheard of. Like we never were doing that in real court. Like you just went there and you kind of hung out forever.
Mhm.
And hopefully you made it on the stand by after lunch or the day's over. So I think there's a lot of efficiencies that are happening and it's in a space that we needed the efficiencies. I was happy because we were already doing a lot online, how we present valuations in general. It's easier to do it on a Zoom where you can show everybody the same numbers, but it got the clients to come to where we were already. And that I was grateful for because we're a lot more efficient. If we could just do it, like instead of getting everybody in the conference room and doing that, hey, can we just do it in 3 days at noon? Okay, great. That was unheard of. So I think that there's going to be a ton that we keep from this pandemic economy.
Mhm.
But now we all have to think. And that's where I think her video came into play. We have to think, okay, here's what we know. We know how it was. We know how it currently is. And I believe that we're in a pandemic economy. That's what I'm calling it. And
Mhm.
we have another year, right? So the next year, we're still going to be in some form of this pandemic economy. How do you operate now, but then in the short term for the year? And then how are you ready when we flip, right? And it's not going to be a fast flip. It's going to be a progression, but are you ready for that next economy? And that's where I think it's really going to take creative minds and paying attention to those that are kind of coming before us. You know, Susan's trying to pave the way and say, okay, you guys need to get some technology, you need new speakers, new audio, all of it. It's like, but we all just got used to doing this, you know, so it's going to be ever changing. And I think that's, for me, it's exciting. I think it also creates opportunities because not everybody is going to want to do it. Not everybody wants to do online. That when this first started, everybody was like, how could we possibly mediate without being in person? There's so much. How can I testify without being in person? Because there's so much that I see, right? I see on your face. If I can't see it, if I can't see a judge like literally go, huh? What? You know, because then I'm like, oh, okay, need to circle back around there, you know, or them go, you know, like it's hard when you're doing all this, or even here, like, am I looking at Elliot? Am I looking at Kim? Like, how am I doing this? Am I paying attention? You know, I think those are the things that you have to practice and you have to hone those skills. But what other big advice do you have for people starting out, or even people like me? Like, I think you guys are light years ahead of me in the mediation techniques and things like that. Like, what could I learn or do better, or somebody starting out?
Boy, let's restart the program.
Okay.
And go through everything we just said. I guess passion, patience, a path, and persistence. That's what you need. That's what you need. And then be humble and be compassionate to yourself so that you can be compassionate to other people.
See, that was perfect.
That was really well said, Elliot. That was really nice. Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. Kind of everything that we said summarizes that. I think don't be afraid to ask for help too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, reach out to people. It's interesting. When I do mentor people, and because I made a commitment to do that because of having such a hard time finding a mentor, right? And the people that are, if you can just find the people that are willing to help, it is such a process. I mean, like Elliot said, patience in the process. That I have a meeting coming up with someone that I have so much respect for. I was in a mediator that I'm, you know, a little bit intimidated because I am newer on this process. It's only been, you know, 6 or 7 years for me. So I think, you know, recognizing that we're learning all the time. Like you said, Melissa, I love that when you talked about co-mediating with someone, because I have my own business, right? And sometimes there's a benefit to someone being able to see what I can't see. I mean, that's what we bring to mediation, right? That we help people see what they can't see on their own, because we only know what we know. So trying to be objective with myself, you know, how did that go, to run it through my head. I mean, that's a benefit for having a co-mediator, is they can see things that you can't. And which is wonderful, because a light bulb can come in from that, but also they can recognize maybe, you know, where improvement can be had. So like you, I'm always reading, you know, and on my kitchen table, on my desk, I usually have one of Ken Cloke's books, either Mediating Dangerously or, you know, one of his that I refer to help not fall into the trap of treating each mediation the same. Like, I don't want to do that, right? I want to go in aware that each person's story is unique, and to go in being as much in the present as possible. And, you know, literally for me, I go into a mediation with a prayer for grace and wisdom, you know, and to make it not about me ever in that mediation, to keep the focus on the clients and let them own their outcome, which can be really hard when you think, oh, this could be better here, this could be better here, or maybe they're this. I mean, to recognize it as their story and,
Right.
you know, that I'm helping them write their story.
Yeah.
So,
It's their path. It's
mhm.
their journey. And, you know, we could all just sit here and be like, well, I could tell you where you're going to be at the end. You know, that could be great. But I think everybody has to go through their own journey in this process, in general or in mediation.
It never turns out like I think it'll turn out. I think if we stay in the moment while we're doing what we do without our own agenda, if it turns out how I think it's going to turn out, then maybe I was driving it to get it there. And if that's the case, it's not mediation. You know what I'm saying? True mediation. So, yeah, I think that's part of the challenge. It's like Elliot said, you know, regulating ourselves and you know, is probably one of the hardest things. And then being open to the emotion. So I would recommend, I really would, for mediators to become skilled at understanding emotions, conflict, the biology of emotions and conflict. If you understand the biology of it, then what looks like too much or abnormal to us because we name things like anger as a problem it is like we talked about. It just is. So we accept that and we ask questions to explore that and what need is missing from that and all those things. So to become comfortable in that is quite the process.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even, you know, people get confused because we talk about mediation and meditation, and they're obviously different. But I think there is a part at the beginning of mediations to do some form of meditation where you're like, you know, let's clear out my bias. Let's clear out my rose-colored tinted glasses that I'm going to look at this. And how do I just kind of let myself witness it and be present and listen to what this specific, because even if I've done 100 million divorces, not any of them have been alike.
That's right.
They all have pieces, you know, like I can usually see like dynamics happening and that helps me, right, understand some underlying issues. But reality is no business that I've ever looked at has ever been the same. And
That's
so I think that you do kind of have to, you know, like kind of zen yourself, clear it out, you know, pray, whatever it is that you kind of center yourself. Because I think that people also, and some people have talked about this, being a mediator is emotionally draining as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so you have to kind of go in and then come back out. Okay, we're not going to take all this with me because that's a lot of pain and anger that is not mine at all, right? But we have to be there in the moment and we have to understand it. So I think there is a lot of that there, just to keep your own self-centered and maybe focused.
Melissa, you don't even know how spot on you are in that. I attended a 2-year, he did 1 year and then 2 years, with William Ury and Thomas Hubel, who is he's a mystic. We all know who William Ury is of Getting to Yes. They did a 2-year mediators campfire talk is what they ultimately called Mediate and Meditate. And it was, so William Ury talks about going to the balcony as a mediator, which means, you know, looking down with an open mind at that, even at our own behavior, so that we're moderating our own behavior during that and helping our clients do that too, you know. But one of my favorite things in that I use a lot that people enjoy is a quote by William Ury. He says, "Speak in anger and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret." So understanding when people are speaking in anger, that is not their truth. You know, their truth is when they're speaking, that's a reaction. So when we're responsive, our job is to help people become responsive and not reactive. So meditation is a great way to do that. And it is becoming popular and common, not, you know, to sit in a yogi position and but to center and mostly stay in the moment. because our reactions are also always tied to our past. They're tied to what we know in the past. They're never about what's going on in this moment, right?
Yeah.
So our responses are. So you're spot on with that. It's and bringing that, emotions are contagious. So if we're riled up or responsive or reactive, our clients will sense that. You can feel that in a room.
Yeah. And my friend Mike Gregory told me once that it's harder to be an active listener. With like normally we're all listening, right? Kind of. I'm not always listening, but I try. But we're listening. But to be an active listener, we have to just listen without trying to calculate our response.
Right.
And that's hard because even now that we're talking, right? We're listening, but we're like, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And it's the same thing in mediation, to just listen. And that's where I think some techniques of mirroring or repeating or reframing help you, because then that gives you the time to think about your response, right? It's all a cadence in some respect. And how do you give yourself some time to think of your response so that you can actively listen when you're in the moment and hear what they're saying, not like, oh, that's a good point. Oh, which is all of our brain's natural tendencies, I think.
I keep a little notepad next to me and I'll jot down a word if I can so that I can stay with you, because like earlier, I completely forgot what I was going to say. I always think of that as a bad sign, but maybe it's a good sign. Maybe it's because thanks. Or dementia.
You won't know about it though. It's fine.
Elliot, you're about to say something.
Elliot?
I forgot. No, I'm kidding. I think it's important that I come in calm and optimistic and open.
Okay.
So when someone has anger, you don't shut it down. You let the storm go. You let the storm pass through. You try not to take it personally, even though it might feel personal at times. You have to understand why it does, because of who you are in the process. And then stay calm, stay optimistic. Because like Kim said, it is contagious. It does affect a person. And if they feel as though their anger has been heard and perhaps validated without necessarily agreeing, you're entitled to that feeling. Now let's think about how to work through that so that you can be in a better place.
Yeah, I think the frequency of the room is set by the highest frequency person. And so if you can't kind of pull that person back down in some capacity, which in general, when somebody gets to that heightened emotional, everybody else escalates with them, right? And so that's how you keep the power. Whereas if you have the mediator is kind of staying here, which is hard. It's hard to not get, as an empath, it's hard to not get emotionally charged when other people's are. And that's where I think it takes the centering, is to kind of pull it down and say, no, I'm going to stay. It also kind of, maybe, Kim, you deal with this in your work, is the grief process. In grief, I think, or if you have kids, go into the emotion, go all the way. In some, I'm like, if you're mad, if you're whatever, like you were saying, Elliot, go all the way in. Are we done? Now let's come back, because again, if this has been pent up, and I've always been wanting to say this because you wronged me when you threw away those dishes, or whatever it is, sometimes it's just something that we didn't even know, that wasn't a huge deal, we're not perceiving it to be a huge deal, but to get it done and aired and out changes the whole dynamic. And so that's why I've always been like, no, we can't, I deal with divorce, and they're like, how do you deal with the emotions? And I was like, well, but they're not my emotions. like and I can be understanding that going through that process, you're going to have some serious emotions. I can also control how far I take you down the path, because there's, oh, my husband is horrible. And there's the person that comes in and say, yeah, tell me how horrible they are. And then there's the other people that say, I understand, I think husbands sometimes do act horrible. I get it. Mine does sometimes too. But they also like have some benefits. Like, I haven't taken the trash out in a decade or more, like it's just not on my list anymore, so there is like, you control and I don't think it's positivity or negativity. I think you control the energy. And if you can, and it's not like saying, stop crying. Don't cry. You're making everybody embarrassed. You're making us uncomfortable. It's like, do you need some space? Do you need some time? Should we, like, what do you feel that you need, as opposed to me saying what you should do? And I think that that's a different, space. To me, mediation and all of this, because I deal with numbers and people have really heightened emotions about money. It's all psychology. It's all interpersonal dynamics. And to me, if you can tune in to people, I think you can be a good mediator. And then you layer in all the stuff that we've talked about. But a lot of that is in connecting on a human level. And if that's a difficulty, I think that that's a difficulty in some of the mediation, unless, that's the kind of personality that's required, of course. But
well said. Very well said. William Ury in all of his trainings talks about separating the people from the problem. And when people come into mediation, the other person is the problem, right? And it's like, even in your example of the husband and wife, my husband, did this horrible thing, so now he's a horrible person. And so separating the behavior from the person, like, that's kind of my job as a mediator, is to say that behavior, what he did, really hurt you or was hard for me, rather than make it all about him, to try to make it about his behavior. And I use parts. I say a part of. So a part of this person did this, to make it not whole and global, to try to keep, I don't like problems to be exploding big. I know they feel that way, but they aren't that way, right? So it's a part of that person. It's not all of them.
Absolutely.
And making sure that you don't have that connection become enmeshment, which is what I think you're talking about. If you become enmeshed with these people, the bond is too close, and now you're not going to be as effective when instead you listen and feel without joining.
Yeah. And I think I think that's an important thing for attorneys to understand if they get into mediation, is that, I see a lot of attorneys that really sort of take on the emotions of their client, right, during like a litigation process. And I think if they're used to doing that, then that's kind of a habit or something that you have to correct and like kind of bring back and say, like, I do something crazy when I go into mediations or even litigation and testifying, because it's such high stress or whatever kind of gets your adrenaline going. And I'm just like, it's not my circus. It's not
That's right.
my monkeys. It's not my kids' health. It's not my health. It's not my husband. Nobody in my family is going to die if I don't do an amazing job at this. So can I be the best? Can I show up? And can I do whatever it is? And I kind of try to get like, okay, universe, help me. Like, don't help me know when we need to stop. Help me know when we should go further or go this way or go that way. And then I think all you're doing is you're not waiting for some divine intervention per se. You're just trying to be more open to like hear the nuances, right? To hear the whispers, to hear the, ooh, I saw that person. This is a big one, when they look at their watch, right? Okay, you're done you're done with this at this point, right? And it could just be a nuance. Yeah. What Kim?
What does that mean that you're looking at your watch?
Mm-hmm.
Because the story you're telling yourself is that they're done. Maybe it means something else. So I notice you're looking at your watch. You know, what does that mean? You know, in hearing you talk, the one thing we forgot to talk about that is probably one of the most powerful tools we have is silence.
Yes.
So I do exactly what you said, have to remind myself that I don't have to have the answers. I don't own the answers. I don't even own the next sentence. And to be comfortable to sit in silence, something always happens. It's crazy. You know, it's crazy. Someone will fill that silence, and then it'll go. Like, I think being in the moment creates exactly what you were talking about, this flow that just happens. If I'm not trying to steer and make the flow, it just happens. I still find that just amazing at the end of a mediation. Amazing. It's kind of, you walk out going, what just happened? Because it just works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, a lot of people oftentimes say that the best mediations is where everyone walks away unhappy. And frankly, I want to disagree with that idea. I think people might not always get exactly what they want from the mediation, but what do they really want? They want to be done with the conflict. And if they can walk away being done with the conflict, that is a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what they thought they wanted is not, when you come in thinking, I want this, this, and this, and then it completely changes throughout the process of the mediation. I mean, that's the beauty of it. So you may not leave, you probably won't leave. Chances are you won't leave with what you came in thinking that you had to have, but that's not to say that you're not coming out even better than when you went in, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for the collateral things that come out of it, like you're talking about, Elliot. Even just peace, being heard, you know, because it is never about the issues. It really isn't about the money or the grandma's pottery or whatever it is that they're fighting about. It really isn't about that. It's always about the things that make being heard such an important part of mediation being successful, of people wanting to mediate more. It's and not so much for companies. I get for big companies and insurance things, it probably doesn't work like that. But for individuals, I think that's the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that, you know, people could listen to this and be like, okay, I just have to be silent. I just have to listen. Like, this is easy. And those aren't easy when we're kind of problem solver people and we're like, well, I'm gonna, you know, like, you came to me with a problem, I'm going to solve it. And it's like, no, you're just going to facilitate and help them. Like, I sometimes call us like master brainstormers. Like, how do we like, okay, do you have some ideas? Do you have some ideas? Let's talk about, could that come up with another idea? Oh, what about that? You know, like, I think that part of that is just trying to facilitate it. But that's where I think it goes a lot deeper, and you have to do a lot of soul searching, because in essence, people most of the time are just like they're risk averse, they are conflict averse, and they can't even say, put the toilet paper roll the other way because I like it that, like, they cannot say what they need or want. And they might be in a relationship or a family situation or even in a job situation where they can't say that and they don't feel like they can do that. And that's where I think some of it gets a little bit of an issue, is that everybody's like, just fix it. Just tell me how to fix it, and then we'll be done, because I don't want to have hard conversations. And that's where I think if you continue to read and focus on, how do people have hard conversations? How do you just start to have conversations and not say money conversations are hard, or intimacy conversations are hard, or kid conversations are hard, you know? But we live in the society that we feel like judged by everything, and people do judge you, you know, but we take that as important. And I think if you can get out of some of that space, then you can be really successful, and you can be successful in dealing with people that have no desire to have these conversations, really.
I love that. One of my passions is to normalize conflict.
Mhm.
So I've given talks on conflict. My favorite is called Confidence and Conflict Skills at Work. But I had a group of CPAs wanting a continuing education talk, and I said, "Well, how about conflict?" And they're like, "Oh no, it's a word like mediation that people go, you know." So I changed it to confidence and conflict, and to try to normalize. Like, we need conflict, right? But the thing is, I say, how did you learn to do conflict when you were growing up? When you were the source of conflict? What happened to you when you were the problem? What do we do to our kids when they're the problem? Do we put you in timeout? Do we tell you you're not good enough to be around, go stand in a corner? Do we yell and scream? Do we spank? I mean, what do we do? Because that's why we've grown up not being able to have hard conversations, not being able to express our needs. I mean, you're exactly right. We haven't learned how to do these things. And then we grow up and we don't feel like we have a right to. You know what I'm saying? It all makes sense. And then there's the biology of conflict in it too. But to get people to understand that the conflict you're going through, lots of people go through. This is normal. It's hard, but it's normal. And my job is to make it safe. And we haven't learned to make it safe for each other. We've only learned how to defend ourselves or how to hurt to protect ourselves, right? So this is a skill. And by mediating, we can mirror the skills that are learned, how to communicate in conflict. I think 99.9% of the time, I have good people in front of me who are just hurting. They're just stuck in conflict and hurting. And once that can come down to what they're hurting and who they are, and not just how awful the other person is, that's when you start having people who can see each other as humans and can start building consensus, or their bridges and their middle grounds, or not middle grounds, but the places they're able to be. But we haven't learned how to do this, and then life gets hard because it's life and we don't know what to do next, so we blame the other person. Right. And another thing William Ury always says, the most difficult person in any conflict, without fail, is the one in the mirror. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard. Real quick story. So I talk a lot about conflict because I think it's a great thing to normalize too, and to learn skills for it. As a mediator, I think we have to. But my youngest son is 18, and when he was 17, I tuck him in bed every night, and I tuck him in, and his room's a mess, and I'm fussing at him, and he's getting mouthy back. And about the point where I wanted to take a pillow and smother him, instead I turned around and walked out of the room, which is avoidance. That's the fight, flight, and freeze. I'm running, which is what I do. I get halfway down the stairs, and I hear this voice behind me say, "And you call yourself a conflict manager?" And you know what? I loved that because it reminded me how hard this is. It is hard. It's not easy. We have to learn how to do it.
Yeah. No, and your analogy with kids is amazing, because I try to reward my children for having calm conversations about issues that, they usually start crying and screaming and stuff like that, and then they get nothing, or whatever it was, there's no results or reward. But at the point, and my 5-year-old is so good at it now, like she can like she sees it and she'll just switch, and she's like, "Okay, mommy, so I really think that I would like the grapes. I know it's too late to have the snack, but and it's fascinating because I think that, I do want to empower people to just be able to say what they need and their truth, regardless of whatever is going to happen. We also have said, if you want to cry, you should cry as long as you want.
That's right.
Like, you might not be able to cry right here, I might prefer you to cry in your room or something, but you can cry for as long as you want because we have emotions and it's hard and you're frustrated and I get it, but I think that's really powerful because a lot of things that we say we should do with our kids or people tell us what to do with our kids actually is really good advice in mediation too.
Wait till your kids start to present PowerPoint presentations to tell you why they should get what they want. Okay?
Yep.
It happens.
Yep.
It's just like the medical reports that I'm given and the mediation summaries. Preparing the mediator with a presentation. Eventually, your kids are going to do that.
I do have a sales. We think he could probably sell ice to Eskimos. Like he is so good and he's so subtle about it. So he's really paying attention, because I always try to make my kids think it was their idea or my husband. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, yeah, I texted you that idea. Yeah, okay, great. But anyway, well, I think this conversation is probably going to be, we're going to probably split it up into 2 segments because it was so amazing, so powerful. I think we offered some advice to people kind of starting out and that are in this space. And so I think it's been very helpful information. And I think that we're going to kind of show different ways that you can reach out to Elliot, different ways that you can reach out to Kim, and all sorts of different things. Did you want to, as we kind of close this out, Kim, to just tell us a little bit more about the book that you wrote?
Yes.
And what it means to people and how you created it?
Thank you, Melissa. I really appreciate that. So the book is How to Live Forever, a guide to writing the final chapter of your life story. And it's interesting that it came out during COVID because we're now talking more about end of life things, right? So in it, I tell stories of my that I've witnessed of people in their end of life phases as a trauma ER nurse, ICU nurse. And, I say that talking about death and dying is the final frontier in taboo subjects that we don't talk about. And by not having these discussions, we're all going to die. So I want to normalize conflict and I want to normalize death. And I bet I don't get invited to many parties when that is my passion, right? But so I call it living well all the way to the end, right? So if we prepare, if we know who we want to be around our decisions for healthcare, our legal decisions, I feel like we turn our power over to attorneys to write things without knowing exactly what we want all the time, or who we want to have it, how we want to leave our legacy. So my belief is our life is our story. And it's ours to write all the way to the end, and all of it matters. And the decisions that we need to make ahead of time, so A, bad things don't happen to us because we didn't, and B, we don't leave our families with a mess to clean up, include the legal decisions, definitely the healthcare decisions. And it's, I always say, if you haven't read if you haven't read Atul Gawande's Being Mortal, it's probably the best book I've ever read about the aging process, the healthcare systems, and what's normal. And we treat ourselves like we're cars going to get a tune-up when something's wrong, and a hospital or doctor is supposed to fix us no matter what. And we're suffering greatly instead of accepting that we're going to die, wanting to live at all costs. So empowering people to make a decision of what their quality of life is that they want to have, to be able to participate fully and not be tortured. And then even in the celebration of life, leaving their story as their legacy, relationships, how to discuss conflict in relationships. Over 50% of people who at end of life are estranged from people. And we estrange ourselves from enough people, we end up alone at the end of life. And nobody wants that, again, for not having learned conflict. So tools and prompts around that. And then to tie that all neatly in a bow, it's how mediation can help us have all of those discussions, because they are hard, but we're all better off having done this. So it's not really a book about dying. It's hopefully a book about living well all the way to the end. And I know we don't know when that is. Like we make assumptions, right? And I know people who have died from infancy to, 100+ years, and we just don't know. So not taking our lives for granted.
I love it. That's very powerful.
Thank you.
So amazing. Thank you so much, both of you.
It's so good to meet you.
Yeah, this was fabulous. And I think it is so long that we're probably going to make it into 2 parts, but woo, we got some good stuff in here. So thank you both. Whenever Elliot comes up with a fabulous idea again, we're going to do it. So hopefully we'll see you both again. Maybe we can talk about even more psychological, emotional, strategic viewpoints of mediation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Elliot. Good to see you.
Good to see you both.
All right. I'll see y'all soon.
Thanks.